All right, Acts 18. Acts 18. We have 11 points. We got a lot of points. There could be others stuck in here. But baby doll's out cold, huh? Yeah. Anybody here experiencing something new in their life? Yes, what are you experiencing? Yeah. Now, the response for my wife when that happens is during vacation. But you see, it's been, I don't take a formal vacation anymore, where we work forever to be able to take 2 weeks off. And then what happens after into the end of the first week? What happens? The wife says, what does she say? Yeah, I can't wait till you go back to work. But that is going to be something new. Yeah, so it's a good thing, and it can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing. Now, in our case over here with vacation, sometimes we took 2 weeks or 3 weeks. The first week is just unwinding from the stress. But there's no stress over there anymore because there's no work. I mean, we would work overtime for a month just to get 2 weeks off. And so it's a week to unwind, a week to sort of start a vacation, and then the third week is enjoying yourself if you did 3 weeks. You know, but by now, one advantage to working for somebody else, the stress is not on you, the stress is on you. Can go home. It's just like any other thing. Even if you're the boss, you have to learn how to leave it at home. Leave it at the door, you know. That is a skill, just like playing all the pianos in unison and following the leader. That there's skills to that. All right, our title tonight is New Horizons. So we have one that's experiencing a new horizon. Anybody else experiencing that? Richard is. Wow.
My boss is leaving.
Oh, your boss is actually leaving. So that's a new horizon.
It's necessary prayer, right?
Anybody, that is pretty major. I'm not going to downplay that. Yes, sir. I can tell you.
We're having a new horizon in Gallio because they've opened up a new distribution center in Columbus where our material is supposed to come from. And so far, it's all messed up in the first week. We were supposed to have delivery yesterday, the truck never came, and we couldn't even call to find out what was happening. And every store in Cleveland that was supposed to get delivery yesterday were lighting up the phone lines to their bosses and wondering what was going on. So, on the horizon, it seems to be the oncoming train.
Anybody see this ad on TV? It's an ad for, I don't know what they're promoting, I forget. And they go backwards from the success of it. I brought it up last night. We were at Bus and Amy's last night. It was Buster's 40th birthday. And Amy made her famous cream puffs. So I had one, and then it was brought up. I told her, I said, you could start a business. They're so good. And but then the topic always comes up. It's always about the what? The money. What are you willing to pay for the cream puff? You know, if you got $2 into making the cream puff and you sell for $1.75, you're going the wrong way.
You're making it up with bulk.
Yeah, well, I know. It's always that, and there's always somebody down the street that'll cheapen it and undersell you. But there are people that are willing to go the extra mile to get it. Now, there are people that go the extra mile to get that Starbucks. It's the grossest junk on the planet. I mean, if you want an ulcer, go get that. But these millennials, I don't know if they have taste buds or not. But they go out of their way, and then what do they pay for that cup of coffee?
Like $4, $5,
$3, $4, $5. Now, but there is a market, and they have a base. And they're successful at it. So who am I to downplay it? You know, it's none of my business. It isn't my business. No. If I was running the business, it'd be out of business. So we were debating how much would you spend for the cream puff. So I said, if I was out with my wife and those cream puffs, I knew what they were and they were available, I said, well, I think I would spend $3.75 a piece for them. You get the white one. You know, it would be hard to pay it. Maybe it's worth $4.75 or $5.75. They're really good. And so I said $3.75. I don't know. I think I was high bidder. Was I high bidder? I think I even went higher. And then I said, after I ate it, after I would have eaten it, then the wife would insist, well, I'd like to have another, but I really don't want the whole thing. So reluctantly, I would go back to the counter and I'd buy another cream puff. Because we'd be on vacation, I'd get this cream puff. Has anybody ever seen, and they weren't kind to me at midnight, you know, because I went and had 2 of them, you know. And anybody see this ad? I don't know what they're selling. It's a couple, a husband and wife. They're selling cookies. And it begins with, this is our 1,000,000th order. So the 1,000,000th one went out. And they're going from the end, this is the end of the story, back to the beginning of the story. It's really, I don't know who thought of the ad. It's a pretty good ad. They had their 1,000,000th order. And so they go back to the next scene is, she said, wow, our first order. The husband says, our first order. They're going backwards. So then the next scene is he takes a bite of the cookie that they made and said, wow, these are really good. We could sell this. And so they go back to the next scene. They get a mixer. It must be a wedding present. And they said, man, we don't bake. You see how the story went backwards. They get the mixer. What are we going to do with the mixer? So they decide, well, let's bake some cookies. Then he bites the cookie. It's really good. They have their first order, and then finally it's their 1,000,000th order. You know, I think it's a pretty cool ad.
Sounds like they're selling a marketing plan.
I don't know what I don't know what it is. I forget what it is. And they do play it regularly in what we watch. But it goes backwards from the success to how it started. So anyway, our title tonight is New Horizons. Now, obviously, we're not talking about selling cookies or anything that is carnal. Now, you can associate it with it and make it that. I mean, you could do it with any kind of marketing. But in this case, did Paul hang out in one spot, by the way?
No.
No, he didn't. Now, he got saved. He was saved. He had got saved. He then was in Acts 13, between his salvation and Acts 13, when they first sent him out. Anybody know how long that takes? Approximately. For a timeline. It's about 10 years. Well, from his salvation to Acts 18, mine says 54 AD. You figure he's got 20 years in this. 20 years.
Including the 14?
Well, it's Acts 54. We'll say he got saved at 33 AD. He's got 21 years in this. How many years do we? Excuse me. How many years do we have here?
27?
No.
26.
What do I hear? 24. It's 24. We just had our 24th anniversary. And it depends on how you feel physically, think mentally. Is it the end of the road, or is it just the beginning?
Be optimistic.
Be optimistic. So that's what we're at. And here we are, New Horizons. We now have 3 pianos. and a deaf, he's still trying to get the bats out of the belfry song leader from hearing the 3 pianos.
No, I had to reset my hearing aid. It did blow off the amplifier.
Oh, okay.
In here.
Okay. Anyway, New Horizons. So it begins in verse 1. We're going to do the first 11 verses. There's a paragraph marking in verse 12, and there is one at verse 7. It says, after these things, Paul departed from Athens and came to Corinth. Anybody, without looking, Anybody know how long he spent at Corinth? I believe it's the longest time he spent at any place. Pardon? No, it's half of that. It's 18 months. 18 months. All right, so it begins with a new path. We do have all P words. So it begins with a new path. So not always, everything stays the same. I mean, you did retire. You retired and called it quits, but is it quits? No, it isn't quits. It's not quits. If it is quits, you may as well start planning your funeral, making funeral plans, because you'll soon die of a heart attack. I would assume a lot of men do if they don't stay active. Why do women not die of a heart attack but the men do? Men die early. They have the stress. The men have the stress. Pardon? Because they continue on with the same routine. Washing the clothes, cooking the meals, getting the guy out the door, go find a hobby, go do something. So, but it starts with a new path. It doesn't mean that necessarily a person quit. They started doing something new or something different. In this case, he's going from one town to another. Now, Paul's habit was to travel around. He was a missionary. A missionary. Now, is missionary a Bible word? It is not a Bible word. So what was he? What was he considered? Instead of a missionary, on the four offices, he was what? Other than an apostle. Pardon? An evangelist. So in this particular case, he is evangelizing. And that's mainly what he did. So he has a new path. Now the path is not something other than being an evangelist. The path is he's going to a new town. There are people who don't like that kind of change. It is scary. It is scary. I've had people that drive by the church for literally years. They come to the church and they said, I've been driving by here for years, and God kept telling me, go there, go there, go there. Maybe up to 3 years before they came, before they had the courage to walk in the doors. Now, if it took you a while to get the courage to walk through the door, you're not alone. It could be a scary thing. Now, do you think Paul was scared? Paul wasn't scared. But it's a new adventure. Could he be excited about this adventure? And he can be very excited about the adventure. So there's a new path. Starla is on the verge of wanting to. What is it you want to do other than take the baby out of here for right now? She wants to drive a what? Drive a car. Now that is a new experience. And it could be very scary. I remember when I actually took the driving test, not the written test, but the driving test. If I could have had a heart attack, I would have had a heart attack at that moment. I mean, I could feel every bit of my blood pressure and every vein in my body going boom, 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 boom. I passed, and I got my license and so on. But a new path. And so new things can be scary, but there is a new path, and people, in this case, Paul is freely choosing this. He's freely going along a new path. Verse 2, and found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, lately come from Italy, with his wife Priscilla. So there are new prospects that come along the way. Now, one of the men that worked next door came to church last week. And I don't know people's motives. He came to church. He came again this week. After that sermon, I decided, it would be wrong for me not to publicly and offer, salvation to him, to raise the hand to see if he is willing to do that. Now, we did it's called the Baptist what? If you lift your head up.
Invitation.
No, the Baptist peak. Is Baptist do the Baptist peak? He was the only one that did the Baptist peak, and he's not even a Baptist. The peak.
I didn't hear the K. I'm sorry.
Okay, the Baptist peak. Anyway, but he came. Now, he has said, now he's talking to the boys. He didn't tell me. He said, what else am I going to do? So on a Sunday morning, doesn't Johnny Cash sing a song about that? Sunday morning coming down or something like that. You know, a kid was kicking a can. The beer I had for breakfast wasn't bad, so I had one for dessert. Sunday morning could be and Sunday in general could be some of the loneliest times in a person's life. Or it could be the opposite of that. Some of the best times of your life because of church. So anyways, what am I going to do if I'm staying home? There's nothing to do. I mean, what are you going to do? Watch a rerun of soccer? You know, a tape of that? What are you going to do? You know, so he's decided to come to church. I'm glad he has. New prospects. Now here, there are new prospects that can come. It says here, in brackets, because that Claudius had commanded all Jews to depart from Rome, and came unto them. So when he commands the Jews to depart, what's that? What key word is that called? When he kicks people out, we call exactly. It's a new persecution. This is some old persecution. They're not persecuting necessarily Christians. They're persecuting, in this case, and I'm not saying Priscilla and Aquila were lost people. I would assume they were saved Jews. I would assume so. So there's a new persecution that's out there. And because of this persecution, these people had come. So a new persecution, not that persecution is some new thing, but it's just a repeat of some old things. So there's a new persecution, and persecution comes and goes. There could be a time when there is no persecution. And when there is persecution, what generally happens to the church? Scatters, but they say that when Queen Anne or Queen whatever, or a Bloody Mary, that the church actually grew. So it can have a positive effect. So there is a new persecution. He has these new prospects that he just meets. They have a lot, a lot in common, that they're Jewish. So I mean, they can just hop up. They can start talking right away. He meets it. He's probably outgoing and willing to meet people. New path, new prospects, a new persecution. And then in verse 3, because he was of the same craft, you know, they have this now affinity. It really has nothing to do with being a Christian. It has nothing. They had something that they could converse over in a fellowship over, other than fellowshipping over the Lord. It says he abode with them and wrought, for by their occupation they were tent makers. So now I'm jumping to conclusions here, and that is he has these new prospects because of this new persecution. Now they're actually staying together. During the day, they're sewing up these tents. Now, what do you think they're talking about? Are they talking about the Cleveland Indians? Pardon? And that is my next new one. He now has new partners. Because the conversation, you know, I think we're safe to read in between the lines. They're not talking. What kind of thread are you using on your tent? I don't think they're talking about that. And what kind of needles are you using? You know, anybody ever see tent needles or leather needles? I mean, they're heavy duty. You know, they probably had heavy duty needles. Now, what probably would they have been made of years ago?
Or bone.
Oh, I think you're right. Bone. Yeah, probably a sliver of bone, and they somehow get a hole in the end, and and they're using it. So he has these new partners, and so the conversation is. I mean, how long can you talk about tents? Right? The conversation goes beyond that. They're not talking about baseball or whatever the sports are. It's gone from talking about Jews getting persecuted, leaving, why did you leave, and how did you leave, to probably they were talking about the Lord. We assume. So now he's on this new path. He finds these new prospects because of a new persecution that was taking place. And now these Priscilla and Aquila become almost like new partners with them. And so he's got these new allies that are going to help him. And we know that he commends them at the end of Romans 16. He commends a lot of people He has his new partners. And it says here in verse 4, and he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath. Now, who would you be reasoning with? Jews or Gentiles? He's reasoning with the Jews. Now, I'm not saying he did not reason with the Gentiles in times past. Because we have the Jerusalem Council in Acts 15 where the Gentiles are getting saved. Would you reason differently with different groups? The end result would be the same salvation. Would you reason differently with different groups? The Jews already worship the Lord. The only thing is they got to realize that Jesus is the Lord. And they got to stop this sacrifice. Jesus was the sacrifice. So the reasoning is different. So the reasoning is going to be different. Now, but this is now going to be enhanced. Not that he hasn't done it in the past, but now he is going to do it, a lot now, because it's coming up here that his life is really going to change. So I say a new persuasion, because he's not only persuading in the synagogue every Sabbath the Jews, but he's also, and it's in the verse, and persuaded the Jews and the Greeks. Now we assume the Greeks were not in the synagogue. Where did he meet them? Does he meet them on the street? When does this happen? It doesn't give you all the information. God only gives you the information we need. But he has this new persuasion. He said, if I use that angle over here, if you go into a jail, you don't have to preach to them about what? Sin. So you reason differently with somebody that's in jail. They know why they're there. Now you can bring it up. They have to know they're a sinner. And differently than when you're reasoning downtown with a bunch of businessmen who are Fortune 500 people. They don't think they sin. Right? They're clean from sin. So there you have to reason with them differently and really enhance the sin. That they're damned, they're going to hell. So you persuade people differently, but the result is the same. It's not that there's some other way of salvation, but there's other ways of persuading people. You probably persuade men differently than women. They think differently. And so on. I know that's shocking and horrifying to some people, but sad to say, I mean, the bubble has been burst, The persuasion. Look at verse 5. Now his old crowd shows up. And when Silas, because Paul had left them behind, and when Silas and Timotheus were come from Macedonia, Paul was pressed in the Spirit and testified to the Jews that Jesus was Christ. So it's not that he wasn't ever pressed in the Spirit, but every once in a while we get lethargic about things. Everything's going well. I can put it on auto control. Well, you know what? Everything's okay now. I'm just going to put it on auto control, and you know what? We're going to end at the finish line, and everything's going to be cool. But his old crowd shows up, and he gets all excited. And the Holy Spirit, what's the next P word? It's in the verse. There's a new what? What's the P word? Pardon? A new pressing. It's a new pressing of the old pressing. In other words, now the Holy Spirit could do it for different reasons, but this is obviously to win lost people. So he wasn't pressed in spirit for a while. He's got it on auto control. He's traveling. Silas, Timotheus, they're going to catch up to me. I meet these new people, and now the old crowd came back, and he said, "Hey, Paul, what's going on? What's going on?" And the Holy Spirit said, "You better get out there." A new pressing, right? Do you ever get tired? And you need to get inspired. We need inspiration, right? There are ways to inspire people. One way, if you don't work, neither shall ye eat. That is inspiring. Right? If you don't get out of bed, young person, you're going to end up with a spanking, and so on. There are ways to press people. The Holy Spirit came along, and and pressed him because he needed pressing. You wouldn't think Paul needed pressing, but he needed a kick in the pants. Or let's get moving here. So there's this new pressing, because this is a new horizon. It's kind of like, let's take the pianos, for example. I stopped. If you want to get a free piano, you're going to have to make an effort to stop at the house, knock on the door. We went to a sale, and they advertised out in the yard, free piano. I said, well, I'd like to see it, because we happened to mention we'd like to get a free piano. So I went up in there, I went in the house, and I tested it out, and I thought to myself, or maybe we talked about it after, and then I went back, I think I went back the next day. I did, I went back the next day. So it had to be we already wanted it, because that was a Saturday. I went back, maybe Monday I went back. Oh, we already gave it away. Somebody picked it up and out the door. So we must have talked about it on Sunday. Went back Monday. But she said, but we have 2 other pianos that are free that we're going to get rid of. So we got the one up there that we wanted, the other one ended up over here. Now what would restrict us from getting it? Yeah, oh well, I got to move it. So what would hold you back from having it moved?
There's a line on the street.
The cost, not the muscle, because I could have got enough muscle. What would have happened to the pianos if I had gotten the muscle? We may have a Laurel and Hardy piano over there. You know, it may have been a Laurel and Hardy piano. You need to. I told her. I said, well, listen, I'm going to have it professionally moved. And so I called my regular mover, and he bowed out. He said, I'm not doing that anymore. And so he bowed out, and I called, he recommended somebody else, and the people that moved it in the new piano, the new old piano in there, are the same people that moved this one over here. So you can say, well, you know, if it's not free, people aren't moving, man. Or if it's not put right up to their mouth, they're not eating. Folks, you've got to get inspired to do something, just pressing. So I could have said, well, I'll just let it pass, and maybe it'll show up. I mean, preachers are like this, folks. Preachers are like this. I would one in particular. I would say, well, we have a paper cutter. Went to an auction. I wanted this paper cutter to make our own tracks, cut heavy cardstock, and do it in bulk. So I went there to put a bid in. They were selling printing equipment, all kinds of stuff like that. And they got to this big paper shear. They sell them up to $100,000, these paper shears. It's a big one. We had an old one. We had an antique one that was manually operated. I sold that for $300 and some. I sold it for as much, if not more, than what we paid for it. And then when they got to the auction on the paper cutter, they said, let's start this out at $1,000, $1,000. They're doing their thing. And everybody's, I got my ticket, and I got my number. And I'm not putting it up for, the church is buying it. I'm not putting it up for $1,000. And no one bid. He said, oh, well, we're down to $500. So let's get it started, $500. And those cutters are worth, that cutter probably is worth a couple, $2,000 to $3,000 maybe. New, it was probably $30,000. Could have been. It could have been $20,000. Yeah, I've seen them up to $90,000 to $100,000. That's probably got a steering wheel, gas pedal, it's got everything. And, well, 400, and then he $200, he got down to $200, let's get bidding on this, let's get bidding. Everybody's looking around. Now, why wouldn't you want to move that paper cutter? It weighs a ton, brother. It weighs a ton. Meaning, man, you got to have a new pressing to get inspired to move that. But I know the boys, it was wintertime. There's snow in the parking lot. They did have a tow motor in the place next to it. Now, usually you have to get a rigger. You have to pay for that. But we had trailers, and I had the boys, they went over there with a trailer with me. Well, anyway, they got down to $100. And I thought, well, I don't want to lose this thing. And I came specifically for it. I probably could have got it for 50. He said 100. He said, fellas, doesn't anybody here want a paper cutter today? Nobody? So I put my card up, and you know what he said?
So,
He didn't go in $25 increments, $50 or $100. He just, as soon as the card went up, sold. It was sold. We were the owner, so we got it over there. So I got that over there. We went and paid about $1,400 for a paper scoring machine. It cuts and scores. It is fluting high end. It'll do 10,000, 20,000 an hour. But we run the tracks through it. It scores it. I mean, they just go flipping out, and they fold up nice. I mean, it runs really nice. We got this piercer. It's my piercer. Got this piercer, huge die, to make door hangers and all. Well, I got all this equipment. I showed a preacher. He said, well, we're going to pray it in.
well,
We're going to pray it in.
and you weren't.
Well, what was that? That was an insult to me, that we did it in the flesh. He's doing it in the spirit. What kind of what paper cutter, press, and scorer do they have?
None are broken.
Nothing. They have nothing. They never got it. They could pray till they're blue in the face. They want Santa Claus to bring it right to the front porch. That's what they want. Some of these preachers are like that.
And the Easter Bunny.
That we're just going to fall into this.
And there's servants too.
I'm just sick of them. Just sick of them. And usually most of them never really worked a day in their life. A new pressing. That we have to be pressed in spirit to get up and do it. Get up and do it. It's like those cabinets. Now listen, Brother Nawalnik said we need new cabinets. We had these cabinets back there. They served us okay. It was a Walmart special or a, who knows where they got them. You know, one group bought them, they were there. Well, they were made out of pressed wood, you know, that, glued together sawdust. Eventually, the pegs came out, the doors fell off. It was just, you know, they were sick. So I had this stack of oak that was out of one tree. And you try to keep the oak together. You don't want to mix it because it can look different from tree to tree. I got every scrap out of the tree to build those two. And that's fine. Those suckers are nice. They're really nice. But it took an effort to do it. You know what they want to do? Well, I'll have some woodworker girl come in here and do it while I'm sleeping. I'm just so sick and tired of that. Sick and tired of it. A new pressing. Finally, after 3 years of we're going to build those, we're going to do that. We're going to do it after 3 years. They got done. They got done. We need to get those Spanish things done. We need to get the next 4 tracks done or 5 tracks so we have a full 20. We need to get it done. So there's got to be this new pressing. Look at verse 6. And when they opposed themselves in blasphemy, he shook his raiment and said unto them, these are the Jews, and said unto them, your blood be upon your own heads. I am clean from henceforth. I will go unto the Gentiles. So now he's saying, I am going to a new people. A new people. Did he witness to Jewish people after that? Absolutely. But his focus was now on a new and a different people. Didn't mean he didn't witness to Jewish people, but he's now focused on this new people. All right, so it's kind of like the billboard. We have the billboard. Wouldn't it be nice to have billboards all over the entire Cuyahoga County? Going. Eliminate that billboard and eventually just have one billboard. If we had one billboard, where would you put it? Think of Cleveland. Where would you have the billboard? One billboard only. You want to reach as many people as you can.
Down front of a baseball stadium.
On the way out from the basketball arena and the baseball arena.
Really?
Heading out toward
That's
the...
also the way home for all the people that work, going east to
Well-
west from downtown.
Pardon?
Intervale Bridge, no longer.
That's
The
exactly right.
inner belt bridge.
The inner belt bridge.
Well, I wouldn't go there. That's all right. It's fair game for me to ask. It's fair game for you to say.
Yeah, the point of it.
But to make a point, let's just go to the 480 bridge. 80,000 or 100,000 people cross that every day. Instead of the one little billboard, you got a dozen of them between Cleveland and Akron where those flash. The same company owns those big boys.
And it's
Just-
the busiest stretch of highway in the state, 480 between.
And that's true. Now you have your steady stream, and then you have, I'm not a steady stream, I don't travel that every day. I might go over there once a month, or every other week, or maybe every other month. And people, so you got those people. Your steady stream is 80,000 to 100,000 people daily.
Yeah.
And so I'm just picking that. You could pick out a better one, but I don't think that you're going to be hard pressed to find something better than that. You got to admit that's a pretty good billboard. It's pretty expensive though too. A new people. So you're finding this new stream of eyes that are going to look at this. A new people. Verse 7. And he departed. He moved. He doesn't move out of Corinth. It says he departed thence, meaning he must have been living in an apartment someplace, someone's home, and entered into a certain man's house named Justus, one that worshiped God, whose house joined hard to the synagogue. So he now has a new providing. God provided him. He's, man, I'm packing my bags. I am out of here. He didn't leave town. He just went from the east side to the west side. Or he moved 3 blocks down. God supplied him a new providing. And this one joined hard to the synagogue. So was there more than one synagogue there? But there was a new providing for him. Listen, we say this, that and if you put all the ducks in a row, you've got to have the vision, then you got to have the people to do it, then you got to have the capital, then you got to have. Well, sometimes God works backwards. He supplied you, let's say, he dumps, just as I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Let's say he dumps in your lap a brand new what's a big Chevy Rad engine? A 396? Is that a Chevy? That's a Chevy Rad. A brand new blueprinted Chevy Rad engine, and drops it in your backyard. For some reason here you can have that. And you say, what am I going to do with an engine?
I can flip it.
That's not a bad idea, brother. You would flip the engine.
Put it on eBay.
The very first car I should have bought that I didn't buy, if you're going to get carnal, I was a kid, dumb. I had owned 3 cars. I bought a Model T that had water in the cylinders. I think I paid $100 for it. I had owned another car that finally I sold that because I now was going to get married. And it's the wife of this. I sold the car. But along the way, there was another car for sale. It was a 32 Ford Roadster. It was used on the drag strip. It had all new tires on it. It had a tow bar on it. And it was less what? What was not in the car? He drag raced it. What was in it? It was complete. Dashboard, everything. Paint job, complete. What was missing?
The water.
No, he had a drivetrain. He had a cut drive shaft. The drive shaft was already cut. I think it was for a 350 or a 3 or whatever it was. What was missing in the car?
Well, the engine and transmission is what I'm getting.
The engine and the tranny were out of there. Well, what did God put in your front yard? Brand new. Sometimes God operates backwards. In his eyes, it's not backwards, it's forward. He already gave you the engine. Now what are you going to do with this engine? Well, next week for sale was this car. And guess how much they wanted for the car? They wanted $700 for it. Does that sound cheap or expensive?
Back in the day.
And what time in the 1970s?
Yeah, about 1970.
That's a lot of money.
All right.
Well, today, that wasn't even cheap. That's a gift. All I had to do was put a tow bar or a hitch on my car, put it on there, and haul it home. But I was a stupid kid. A new providing. God will provide. And He doesn't necessarily provide it in the order that you and I think of. It could be in some other order. A new providing. Verse 8. And Crispus, the chief ruler of the synagogue, believed on the Lord with all his house. And many of the Corinthians hearing believed and were baptized. Things had turned around. There was this new providing, and all of a sudden, Paul realizes there's a new potential here. So our verse 8 and our 9th point is there's a new potential. You know, there is potential here for something to really explode here and something that's really going to happen, such as that cookie business. They have this mixer. Well, we don't cook. We don't know. Or he says, well, we don't bake. And this mixer then makes the cookies. Boy, they're really good. You know, we could sell these. Then they had their first order, then their millionth order. So you have this new potential. And things can start small, but man, things are starting to explode. Verses 9 and 10. Then spake the Lord to Paul in the night by a vision. Be not afraid, but speak and hold not thy peace. For I am with thee, and no man shall set on thee to hurt thee. So he's got now a new promise. God gives him a promise. This promise that you're going to make it. No one's going to hurt you. Go ahead and speak up. You're not going to get stoned to death. He's got this new promise. And, where are we at? Oh, and he says in verse 10, we're going to speed this up, we're at 7 bells. A new promise. For I have much people in this city. So now he has a new priority. I have much people in this city. He's not going to go to the next town. He's not going to that town. He's not going here. He's not going there. He's got this new priority. I'm going to focus in on this. I'm going to focus in on these much people that the Lord has in this city. A new priority. A new priority. Just because, brother, you are retired doesn't mean all things are off, all bets are off. It doesn't mean all bets are off. It could be just the beginning. Just the beginning. You know, these people, people die young, folks. And your new beginning may take you up into your 90s. A new beginning here. So he's got this new priority. New priority. Verse 11, what was his main calling? In other words, he was an apostle. But when he went around from town to town, he was a missionary. He was a what? Was he a pastor and a teacher? We say he was all four. He was all four. But this last one, notice what it says. It says here, and he continued there 1 year and 6 months. Now, I could have had another Peter here. I couldn't think of what it is. Folks, sometimes it takes time. You know, I wanted this land over here for the boys. I had made an effort to get it. And I wanted to put on it a nursery. None of the boys have any desire for a nursery. They say that this guy down the street here, he's probably the biggest in the state. They're raising the stuff in Florida and shipping it up here. And if you were to start a nursery, would it happen overnight or would it take... Sister, you're right. It's going to take a little bit of time. You can't expect to put $100 in the bank and have it turn into $1,000 tomorrow. It takes time. So if you're going to start a nursery, how do you do a nursery? What's it made out of? Where do I buy it? How do I put it up? Who will run the nursery? How do I water the plants? You know, if it's too hot in there, how do I cool? You know, on and on it goes. Well, I haven't been trained in it. Well, when you were born, what were you trained in? You weren't even potty trained, you know. It takes time. So it took, and he spent 1.5 years there. For I am with thee, and no man shall hurt thee. Verse 11, and he continued there 1 year and 6 months, teaching the word of God among them. Our last point is he now has a new position. He is not the evangelist. It's not Paul the evangelist. At this point, now he was a teacher before. You can go back to Acts 13 where he was a teacher before. But we're going back 20 years or so. We're going back, or 10 years back. He now has a new position, a new old position. Well, I've done it before. I guess I'll do it again. Where he probably was the pastor teacher. So he ends up at this point in his life with a new position. Listen, when there's new horizons in your life, right? New horizons. Life isn't over, folks. Life ain't over. When's it over?
Till it's over.
When it's over. It ain't over yet. And don't cut yourself short. Shake hands before leaving.